Hi everyone, this is Greg Hunt. I'm a mediator, a trainer, and host of No Disputing That, a podcast for anyone with an interest in dispute resolution. In this series, I sit down with some of the leading names in the dispute resolution field to discuss mediation, arbitration, and other forms of alternative dispute resolution, which we also call ADR. We may even cover other issues in the law and in life in general. Expect some laughs, some honesty, and quite a few editing errors along the way. This podcast is split into two episodes because it was about an hour long, and that's too long to expect anyone to listen in one go. And what Ben was talking about was fascinating, so I thought it'd be better to have two episodes rather than try and put it all into one, just because people might not listen to a whole hour-long podcast. So this is part one. Hope you enjoy it, and if you do, keep your eyes peeled. Part two will be out in a couple of days. Thank you. Welcome back. Today I'm with Ben Giaretta, who for the last 20 years has had a varied career in international arbitration. Ben started out as a solicitor at Ashurst Morris Crisp in London, known today as Ashurst LLP. And he started to work in international arbitration shortly after qualifying. In those early years, he also did the diploma in international arbitration at Queen Mary University of London and became a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Ben's focus on arbitration began when he moved to Singapore in 2009 to establish Ashurst's dispute team in Asia. I'm really struggling to say Ashurst's. In Singapore, he worked on a wide range of arbitrations across the Asia-Pacific region. He got his first appointments as arbitrator and he joined the branch committee of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, Singapore. All this continued when he transferred back to London 7 years later. From London, he's continued to work on arbitrations across many sectors and many countries as both arbitrator and counsel. Ben's now a partner and co-head of international arbitration at Fox Williams LLP, a leading independent law firm in the City of London, and he continues to be involved heavily with the Chartered Institute. He was the first honorary secretary and then the chair of the London branch, and in November 2022, he was elected to the Board of Trustees of the Institute as a whole. Ben, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here.
Pleasure. And what people can't see is you're sitting in a nice office with a view of Finsbury Square.
Yep. Looking at the view now.
Oh, nice. I actually once slept in Finsbury Square. It was when I worked at the Institute. Yeah. Well, I was at the beginning of the night. It was when I worked at the Institute, and it was something called Bite Night, and it was where people would sleep out for charity for the homeless. Yeah. And it was really good night. And I actually, part of the sleeping out experience was for a short period of time I shared a sleeping bag with Jenny Agatha. But that is a different story, which can be saved for maybe when we're with each other and we're having a pint. But so I know exactly where you are. For 20 odd years, my route into London was Liverpool Street Station, and then for quite a few of those years walking up City Road. So I know exactly where you are. So anyway, it's good to have you here. I'm going to dive straight in with some questions. Okay. So be as give as long answers as you like, short answers. Tell me you don't want to answer a particular question. Move on. Just do what everyone do. Okay. You've got a glittering career in arbitration. Okay, and I see that all the time. And I looked at LinkedIn and see the sort of posts you do, the conferences you speak at, the people that you're mixing with in the arbitration sector. A large part of that career has been spent in the membership of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. I worked there for 13 years in my first role in ADR. And actually one of my early roles was something which I don't know exists now, was the role as the branch liaison officer. And my role was to liaise with all the different branch chairmen, branch secretaries, who would come into the Institute every 6 weeks or so, have a meeting, and I wouldn't chair the meeting, I'd be taking minutes. and then I might have conversations with them about events that are coming up and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was a good role. It was a good role for me to have because it introduced me to the sort of way branches work and also some of the influential people who were involved in running the different branches.
Yeah.
It's made me wonder now, all these years later, first of all, does that role still exist? Is someone doing that? It'd be interesting to know. And secondly, when you were chair of the London branch, it always sort of made me wonder, what exactly does a chair do? So do you want to outline for me what a chair of a branch actually does?
Sure. And let's say thank you very much for describing my career as glittering. I'm not sure about that, but I mean, I'll accept that I have been involved in arbitration in various different ways over the years and various different things. The question also about the branch liaison officer, to be honest with you, I don't really know. And I should also preface all of this by saying that firstly, although I have just been elected as a trustee, I don't actually become a trustee until the 1st of January. So I've another month to go before I am actually a trustee. I also should preface this by saying that everything I say here is my own personal view, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Institute in any way.
No, of course not.
The question about branch liaison officer, to be honest with you, I don't know. I know the Director General of the CIArb, Catherine Dixon, is putting in a lot of effort to coordinate things across the branch network, and is, for example, hosting regular calls with branch chairs across the world. She can't do them all the branch chairs at the same time because they're in different time zones, but she's speaking to them on a regular basis. And in fact, we've just had this CIArb Congress where they all get together as well. So communication and liaison between the branches and the headquarters is a vitally important thing to be doing. But your question about what does a branch chair do? I'll tell you what I told my successor when I came to the end of my term as branch chair. I said this to her before she became. I talked to the various people about who want to become chair. I talked to them about what it involves. There is the visible stuff and the invisible stuff, by which I mean there is the visible roles you play when you chair branch events, where you chair branch meetings, where you liaise with the headquarters, like I just said, on branch chair calls. But there's also quite a bit of, I call it invisible, but sort of behind the scenes stuff, where you are speaking to other members of the committee, supporting other activities of the branch, speaking to branch members, speaking to people at the headquarters. I must confess that when I took on the chair role, I did rather underestimate how much time I will be spending on it, which is not to say it's possible to do. I mean, it's perfectly achievable to do, but I did find that it was more work than I'd expected.
Yeah.
So being a branch chair is very much about being the important part of the glue that holds the branch together during the time that you are the chair.
Yeah, I certainly remember from my time as a member of staff at the Institute, the amount of work that people like branch chair and secretaries and so on did on a voluntary basis to keep the Institute in the forefront in their community, and it was a very prestigious role to hold. Yeah,
I agree. And there were some people who put in even more time than me. I mean, I was always Jonathan Wood at RBC, who's just been elected the president of the CIArb for 2024. Let me get my years right. He's always put in an enormous amount of time supporting the Institute, I must say. I mean, as an example, and so have many other people who are all volunteers.
Yeah, no, it's great. So now you've been voted in as a trustee, and I appreciate you don't start till January. What are your expectations of what that role's going to bring?
It's funny, I went to the CIArb Congress just a few days ago, and for the first time I approached the CIArb from a different point of view. So previously, I'm going to say I would have attended the Congress as a branch chair. I mean, I did attend a Congress, but it was all online. It was during the pandemic, so didn't have a chance to get together. But previously I worked as the branch chair. This time I was going as a trustee or a trustee-elect, and as approaching from a different point of view, from the point of view of not someone involved in a particular geographical area, London, but instead having an overview over all the branches and all the branches across the world. And I mean, I rather jokingly refer to it as being a poacher turned gamekeeper, but but actually it's to do with a different point of view and a different way of supporting members and supporting the branches, and listening to the branch chairs about the different dynamics, different issues affecting branches in different parts of the world, which I must confess, without speaking to different branch chairs the other day, I hadn't really appreciated. I mean, you look at the CIArb from the point of view of London and the London branch, the work, and you can make various assumptions about what other branches are like, but actually it's not until you actually speak to the other branch chairs that you get to appreciate there are in fact several differences in different parts of the world. So that was very enlightening, actually.
Yeah. So do you think being a trustee, you'll see more of that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the role of the president of the institute is much more about liaising with the branches, much more about traveling the world and seeing people in person. So being a trustee is not quite on the same level, but it is true that the role of the trustee, as I see it, is an important part of it is about liaising with the branches and overseeing what the branches are doing, but also supporting the branches in what they're doing.
Yeah. God, I'm sorry, when you say president, it still shocks me a bit because I'm so old that when I worked at the institute to start with, it was a chairman before the president.
Yeah.
Some great names though. I mean, think back to when I was there, we had John Sims, Harold Crowther, Arthur Harvard, Geoffrey Beresford Hartwell, John Campbell, probably several others who'll kill me for forgetting them now. It was some great chairmen actually and presidents along the way who I interacted with mostly around the appointments process because I was responsible for the teams that ran the different arbitration and mediation and adjudication appointments. So would recommend to the chairman stroke president who maybe should be considered for different appointments, and then they would sign them off. And it was a good role. It was good fun. And of course, when you're dealing with people as experienced as some of the names I've just said there, it really gives you a good grounding in arbitration itself, just from conversations and so on.
Yeah.
So who's the chair going to be, the president going to be when you're a trustee?
Well, the current president is Jane Gunn, and her term actually expires the end of December, so we won't overlap. Although I know Jane well, but when I become a trustee on the 1st of January, it will be John Bassey from Jamaica, and so my term as a trustee is 4 years long. So John Bassey in the first year, it'll be Jonathan Wood in the second year, and then Mohammed Abdul Wahab in the third year. That's in 2025, and then the president in 2026 is not yet known. That person will be elected in the next Congress.
Well, you never know. You might stand for it yourself, eh?
I don't know.
Maybe,
we'll see.
If you do and you get it, we'll have to replay this podcast. Okay, we foresaw it. Interesting to say about Jane. Actually, I've not met Jane for a long time. Not seen Jane for a long time. But there was a period when we were working together on some mediation initiatives at the institute, and I'll never forget the first time I met her. It was in a small Italian town that was hosting a conference, and Jane had to cover for me a couple of times because Liverpool were playing that night in the probably the UEFA Cup, I think it would have been back then. And, the course, it was a 7-course dinner, and it took hours. I mean, literally, it was gorgeous, but it took hours and hours and hours. So I kept on having to nip off and see if I could find out what the score was. And Jane covered for me very well that night. Did a good job. Moving on, I know that you're a member of several dispute resolution bodies, not just the CIArb, and you're a member of the Worshipful Company of Arbitrators and others. And that gives you a really wide perspective on the state of the market at the moment, and the dispute resolution landscape as a whole. So what are your current thoughts on where we are in terms of dispute resolution, both within, I suppose, not just London, but the UK as a whole, and what any trends that are affecting sort of global dispute resolution, particularly coming back end of Brexit and the back end of the pandemic as well?
That's a very big question. Let me just start off just talking about arbitration. Let's see where we get to with this conversation. I think it's very clear that arbitration has become global. I mean, that's not a controversial statement by any means, and you would say that that's been the case for decades now. Also, arbitration has become much more accessible largely through the introduction of common methods of approaching arbitration, common standards, common protocols and rules and all this sorts of thing. I mean, you can see an arbitration being run in Singapore, for example, as I've seen myself, and it can look in many respects very similar to an arbitration run in Paris or in London or New York or wherever. There are some differences, of course, but there are some very, very strong similarities between arbitrations run in all those different places. So I think it is fair to say that arbitration has become very similar across the world, and that to a large part is a good thing, because it has made arbitration much more accessible across the world, both to parties and to people who want to work in arbitration. And I mean, I get approached a lot by young people across the world who want advice about getting involved in arbitration in countries outside their own country. And they can only do that because arbitration has now become a truly international system. Now, I should also flag there, however, that there is a disadvantage in all of that, because there has become a sense that arbitration has become a little too fixed in some respects. Some of the idea, the flexibility of arbitration has been lost, and also some of the models of arbitration, if I could put it that way. So, I mean, if you think back to the 1970s, 1980s, there were an awful lot of arbitrations done by professionals, trade professionals, construction professionals, insurance professionals, that sort of thing, where they are the arbitrators with a safety valve or be able to apply to the courts on a particular point of law. And that safety valve, that mechanism applying to the courts on a point of law, is still there, it's still in our Arbitration Act, but really it's become a lot less used, because the model of arbitration that we have, if I could put it that way, has predominantly come to involve arbitration lawyers sitting as arbitrator. And I say that not while acknowledging there are an awful lot of people out there who are not lawyers sitting as arbitrator and who are not arbitration lawyers. So it's by no means universal, but there's been a trend towards more arbitrator lawyers sitting as arbitrators.
And I think that's something I've noticed as well. Think back to my days at the Institute, there was a great pride in the fact that in the UK, a lot of arbitrators were technical experts and not lawyers.
Yeah.
And if you think back to all the different committees of the Institute back in those days, in the 90s and the 2000s, there were very few lawyers actually on the different committees. And now I said the names of some of the chairman stroke presidents of the day, and they weren't lawyers either.
I mean, the first president of the Institute back in 1916 was not a lawyer.
Well, I think if we look back at history, I think the history I was always told when I was there is it was set up by a group of construction professionals. And not lawyers at all.
I mean, having arbitrator lawyers as arbitrators, arbitration lawyers as arbitrators, is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, actually, the lawyers that are sitting as arbitrator are often extremely good. They're often particularly good on the procedural side. They're often excellent in terms of managing the process. But on the other hand, you do have to wonder whether we're losing something by not having more people from different professions sitting as arbitrators.
I mean, I'm always very much in favour. It's the right person for the job. Whoever is the right person, it doesn't matter whether they're a lawyer or not. And that's easy for me to say as well, because I'm a non-lawyer mediator, and the same trend is happening in mediation as well. You know, a lot of the big ticket mediation work is going to lawyers who are also mediators, and that's not good if you're not a lawyer. I very much promote, you know, the right person gets the job. It shouldn't matter whether they're a lawyer or not.
And actually, what I've just said about arbitration, at the general point I made about it becoming somewhat homogenized, put it like that. I mean, you could also say that about mediation. I mean, we could talk about, if you like, this proposal to have mandatory mediation and mediation included in all in contracts as a pre-arbitration stage and this and that. All of which makes sense on one level, but on the other hand, it is tending towards a very fixed view of what the dispute resolution process should be, what the fixed view of the mediation process should be. And as we all know, life doesn't work like that in many cases. I mean, I've seen mediations which have been complete failures because they've been started at the wrong point of time. I mean, and I'm thinking in particular of two mediations I've done in the last few years, which have been the result of mediation clauses in contracts. I mean, in the sense of it's the contract that said go to mediation first, then go to arbitration, and the mediation was a complete waste of time because, and largely because the parties hadn't appreciated all the issues in the case. And they were never going to appreciate all the issues of the case until they'd started the arbitration. And actually, in those cases, it would have been much better to have started the arbitration than do a mediation halfway through. Now, not all cases are like that. Obviously, in some cases, you have very successful mediations that start without starting arbitration. But the flip side of that is equally, there are many cases, like I've described, where mediation is the last thing you should be doing at the start. You should be doing the arbitration first, and then starting.
And it comes down to something you said earlier on about flexibility.
Exactly.
And part of the attraction of mediation and arbitration is you can have flexibility about when it happens. And if you make it mandatory, I mean, I've not made my mind up whether mandatory mediation is a good or bad thing yet. But I think one of the definite disadvantages is what you've just said. It's so important the timing is right.
So this is it. I mean, this is what I have seen, that these dispute resolution methods, arbitration and mediation, have become so universal now and so spread across the world, and which is all a good thing in many respects. But it has come at a cost, which is reducing flexibility, or rather, the flexibility is still there, but it's reducing people's mindsets, narrowing their mindsets to be much more fixed in the way things must be done, rather than being open and open-minded about it all.
In arbitration, do you think part of that is what I've seen a lot is under the Act, the arbitrator can be flexible, but parties don't necessarily want the arbitrator to be,
Yes.
and there's a little bit of self-preservation gone on there.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be as flexible as I can be because I might not get another appointment off this law firm. Being controversial maybe there,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's true. I mean, if we say that the initial thought about arbitration and mediation and perhaps even adjudication not being as flexible as in the past, then you have to think of why is it not being as flexible? And actually, the blame lies on several people. It's not just the arbitrators, but also the parties, or rather, it's not just the parties, but also the arbitrators.
yeah.
And sometimes it just falls between the different stools as well. I mean, no one's taking responsibility to be flexible. Or they're turning away from it because they're worried about what the parties will think of them, or the parties are turning away from it because they're worried about what their clients will think of them, or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of fear in being flexible that I see around the place. And you're right that there's a certain amount of comfort by following the set procedures. I mean, it's like, what do they say? No one ever got fired for hiring Goldman Sachs. Is that the phrase? I can't remember what it is, but people play safe in order to avoid criticism.
Yeah. Well, in my days, when I was at CIArb, I heard the phrase a lot from lawyers. No one ever got fired for hiring the CIArb mediator.
Yeah.
You know, and it was the safe, and that's not in any way disparaging it at all. It was based on fact. It was a safe thing to do.
The same point is always applied to the appointment or selection of, or certainly of arbitrators, and I'm sure for mediators as well. That people have always played safe, which to some extent is understandable. To some extent, is a good thing because it's a guarantee of quality. But on the other hand, it restricts the market overall. Overall, it means the market tends towards I'm going to say ossification. I mean, the market becomes fixed and tired, and you're not allowing enough new people to come in and to make the whole thing more diversified. So,
and of course, that's a danger with something like the proposals for mandatory mediation.
Yes,
because you've got quite a small market, but there's lots of mediators who can't get work, and if we get to the point where mediation is mandatory, then potentially a massive amount of inexperienced but trained mediators will be doing those mediations, because the more experienced mediators won't want to do them because they're going to be low value and low paying cases to do. So yeah,
of course, everyone has to. Everyone has to start somewhere. So it's a good.
Definitely.
Maybe that's a good thing as well. I mean, I suppose the point I'm making in all of this is that there are good and bad things. I mean, none of these systems are staying the same. They're all constantly evolving, and there's good and bad things in the way that they evolve.
Yeah, you're right.
And also that there's stuff being reinstated that have previously fallen away. I mean, example is a shadowing of arbitrators. And that used to be done a lot in the past. Then it's when I mean shadowing, I mean in the sense of trainee arbitrators who want to learn about how to be an arbitrator, and then so they go and watch an arbitrator.
Pupillage, really, wasn't it?
Exactly. So that sort of died off in a big way. But now there is a move to reinstate it. The CIArb is going to bring out a new protocol to encourage parties to, or sort of parties to write it into their rules or their arbitration agreement to permit the shadowing of an arbitrator by a trainee arbitrator, which is a very good thing. I mean, it's an excellent idea, but it's very much sort of an old idea coming back.
Yeah, well, it was used when I was at the Institute, but then when the Institute sold its dispute resolution services to CIArb, it died out then because the Institute lost its supply of opportunity. To give people that role. And as I think, I do a thing called Arbitrator Experience Program, ARBEX, where I've tried to give people some opportunity. They need to have done the Institute's course, particularly if they're based in the UK, and they need to have passed the award writing element before. But there is an opportunity to do some documents only work. based on that. But yeah, certainly in the old days, I remember I used to get the letters from newly qualified arbitrators saying, "Have you got any pupillage opportunities?"
Yes.
And it was something which was a particular reason to be a member. It was seen as something very much. It was an opportunity to get on, and it was a shame that died off.
Yeah. Yes, another
it's good. It's good bringing it back. It's good bringing it back. I think that'll be a good boost for the market.
Yeah.
Okay. Just one more thing on arbitration. I think the Act is being reviewed, the UK Act. Any thoughts about what might come out of
that? Well, I would be very surprised if there are any changes that are not in the Law Commission's paper that was published a couple of months ago. I mean, I think we're pretty much guaranteed that the changes will be those that have been set out there, assuming, of course, that change happens. I mean, obviously, what the Law Commission says is one thing, but then it's actually got to go through Parliament and actually be passed by the MPs. But if Parliament does pass it, I imagine the new Arbitration Act will be the 96 Act, but with the tweaks suggested by the Law Commission. I mean, maybe one or two of the suggestions made by the Law Commission will fall away, but I mean, I can't see anything more radical than the Law Commission's report being done. I mean, if you look at the end of the Law Commission report, they do raise the possibility of a much more radical rewrite of the 96 Act. I mean, for example, at one point they talk about introducing provisions to deal with decisions by artificial intelligence. And that suggestion, I mean, they don't quite dismiss it, but they say this is one for another day because it's going to be too difficult. And the moment the market is not quite ready for that, I mean, we're not seeing AI arbitrators out there yet. So this would be something for the future. So they parked that. But so that sort of radical rewriting of the Act it's not going to happen this time around. It's probably going to happen another 10 years, 20 years time. So the new Act is I'd imagine will look much the same as the old Act, but with these tweaks. And the tweaks are all sensible. I mean, I'm not complaining about them. But it won't be anything more than that, I'd imagine.
Yeah, maybe the next version of the Act will be written by AI.
Well, this is it. I mean, of course, when you talk about AI, you think, well, what is AI and what are we actually talking about here? And it may well be that the model of dispute resolution in the future is not arbitration as we know it. It is something completely different. So you wouldn't have an Arbitration Act potentially in the future. It'd be something you'd call the system something entirely different, and you'd have a regulation of that, and you just get rid of all arbitration. I don't know. I don't mean to set hairs running there. And I don't want the headline of this podcast to be Ben Giaretta predicts the death of arbitration, which is not true. I genuinely have no idea what will come in the future. But if we are talking about different ways of deciding disputes, resolving disputes, then maybe that will be a different model which will look quite a lot different from what we have now. There's no guarantee it will be the same in the future.
No, it's but for something that's not changed a lot in centuries, the potential for change in the next century is massive.
I mean change has happened, as you know, but the basic model has stayed the same. And it's just been refined and adapted and evolved over the years. And that change, I mean, it could. I think whatever happens, if it's just an evolution of the current model, then it's likely that pace of evolution will accelerate over the coming decades. So it will change quickly. But it could be that there is sort of an abandonment of the current system entirely and then move on to something else. It's like the death of the dinosaurs and new life on Earth. And again, I can already think of the headline from this podcast. Again, Giaretta predicts death of arbitration is like a dinosaur, which is not what I'm saying at all. But
No.
there
Well, funny enough,
is.
there was a picture up on the wall in Bloomsbury Square of a dinosaur saying to another dinosaur, "Arbitrate, don't litigate."
Yeah, and
So
there could be a picture in the future saying, "Have AI dispute resolution instead of don't arbitrate."
yeah, yeah. Oh well, maybe we'll see one day. Who knows?
Yeah, I know. Who knows?
Thank you for listening to No Disputing That. Please subscribe to hear more from experts in the field. If you'd like to suggest any future areas for discussion or to appear on the show yourself, you can follow us on Twitter at No Disputing That and send us a DM. Finally, if you need a mediator, give my management team at Arbiter International a call on 020 7936 7070 or email info@arbitra.co.uk. See you next time on No Disputing That.